Yesterday, we talked about the guys that are headed to the NFL this year for the Sun Devils. Let's talk about the guys who could potentially be making the leap in 2024 on this edition of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast.
Are Locked On Sun Devils, your daily podcast on the Arizona State Sun Devils, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to the Locked On Sun Devils podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Richie Bradshaw, and I will be your guide for everything Arizona State Sun Devils. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. Wherever you're getting your podcast, hit like and subscribe. Turn on notifications so you get an update whenever we post new content. Stay in touch with that content by following me on Twitter at RichieBrats36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. Today's conversation is a follow-up on yesterday's conversation that will be concluded tomorrow, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But it's never too early to talk 2024 NFL draft, and the Sun Devils could potentially have quite a slew of guys that may make the jump to the next level. I have listed 8 guys that I think could potentially make the jump. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of seniors and grad transfers on this roster that will obviously run out of eligibility. In fact, I do have a couple seniors on this list that I will talk about that either are out of eligibility or would have to apply for another year. And I think we're starting to get past the extra year from COVID. So I don't know how realistic that is. But let's go ahead. We'll start with the offensive side of the ball, and we're going to knock this out pretty quick. There's really only 2 guys that I believe are like truly noteworthy offensively. Now, don't get me wrong, there are several guys, especially if like Cameron Scattaboo has a big season and decides to declare, he could definitely join that list. There's lots of offensive linemen to monitor as well that are going to be entering their final year of eligibility to keep an eye out on. But it really starts and ends with the 2 superstars on offense, Elijhah Badger and Jalin Conyers. Where do I even begin with these guys? I mean, Elijhah Badger is the first guy we'll talk about, and this dude looks like a true number 1 receiver for the Sun Devils. Last season, got 70 passes, 866 yards, 7 touchdowns. He did this with 2 different quarterbacks. He did this in a 3-win season for the Sun Devils, and he did this with offensive philosophy changes in the middle of the season from Glenn Thomas to Sean Aguano, and he truly just took off and really emerged in a year where the Sun Devils had a lot of wide receiver options, but truly didn't have a number 1 wide receiver option. That was not the case in 2022. And building off of that in 2023, I have a feeling that he could be in for a 1,000-yard season, and this feels like a major breakout year for Badger coming in. He's got pro size at 6'2", 190. I don't think he's a 4'3" guy. He might not be a 4'4" guy, but I'll tell you what, dude's got game speed, and he has a tendency of breaking off big plays. And even if they're not, the 70-yard bombs, he is a chunk receiver, and he is able to get nice gains pretty consistently. If he's able to continue refining his route running, this feels like a guy who could really generate some major hype and be a draft Twitter darling that everybody loves to have year in and year out. I think that Badger is only going to continue becoming a better and better receiver if he's able to build off of his success last year. I feel like the NFL is within his future. I'm not saying first-round pick. I'm not saying top 100 pick. But I do think that Badger is going to continue to improve his stock. That's going to get teams thinking about him at the next level. Jalin Conyers, on the other hand, this is a player that I think is going to shock the world and is going to end up being a draft darling. And when I mean darling, I mean this is a interesting tight end class. There's Brock Bowers at the top, and then there's a kid from Texas whose name is totally escaping me right now. And I think after that, it's probably just a handful of guys. It's not the 2023 class that had Dalton Kincaid and Michael Mayer and Darnell Washington and Luke Musgrave and Sam Laporta, and so many other guys. This is Brock Bowers and everybody else. But I think that Conyers can place himself in that tier above the everybody else. He's 6'4", he's 265, he moves really well, he catches the ball very well, he's creative, he's a touchdown machine. I don't know. I look at Conyers and I just feel like there's so much untapped potential for him to become a superstar, maybe even more so than Elijah Badger. We'll wait and see. I'm not ready to commit to that full time because he is playing the tight end position, but man, he was completely unstoppable in spring practice this year, no matter who was lining up against him. He really turned it on in the second half of last season when Sean Aguano became the play caller for the team. And the bottom line here is looking at what Jalin Conyers has put together and what I believe he can continue to put together makes me feel that he's going to be somebody that we're going to be talking about a lot come time for the 2024 NFL draft process. All right, I want to talk to you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. Make a fast break to FanDuel during the NBA playoffs because right now, new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. There's great promotions every day. It's a safe and secure app, and you get paid in instantly. It's the reason why I love betting on FanDuel. There's no better place to bet on all of the playoff action than America's #1 sportsbook. Visit fanduel.com/locked on and get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's fanduel.com/locked on. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you guys, as always, for tuning in. A special shout out to my everydayers who are here every day. Make sure that you tune in to tomorrow's episode as we finish up some NFL draft talk, well, not so much NFL draft, but talking about the Sun Devils that are currently in the NFL, like not rookies, have already been in the NFL, and what to maybe expect from them in 2023. All right, back into our conversation now, looking at some Sun Devils who could have potential NFL futures as soon as 2024. The next guy to talk about, we're going to flip it to the defensive side of the ball. I mentioned that there's some grad seniors to mention here, even though they obviously have to go into the draft. I think that there are some guys that are worth having a conversation about. The first guy I want to talk about, Travion Brown. Brown, a grad transfer from Washington State, really emerged last year for the Cougars under Brian Ward. He had 49 tackles, a sack and a half, and was just an important playmaker for one of the better defenses in the Pac-12. He comes down to Arizona State. He follows Brian Ward. There's a lot of wide open competition at linebacker with a lot of guys who don't have playtime experience. And Travion Brown brings playtime experience. He feels like an easy guy to slot in, but there's a little more than meets the eye here. He's 6'3", 230, so he's got the NFL size. He's got the instincts. He's got the speed. I think that there's definitely a lot of growth that needs to be done here. But I do think that Brown may be able to really parlay his talent and be able to show off that in a system that Brian Ward has established for him that he can be a stud, and being placed in a similar situation in the pros would lead to more benefits being reaped. I do like Trey Brown. I think that he's one of the more slam dunk starters for this team, and I'm really buying the Trey Brown hype this year. I hope that you guys do too. I want to talk about two other transfers here very, very briefly. And it's the special teams guys, Josh Carlson, the punter, and Dario Longhetto, the kicker. Now, Carlson definitely has the stronger case between the two special teamers. He was not an All-American. He might have been like a Division two, not Division two. Bottom line, he is a punter that has received lots of praise and somebody that has shown the capability to be a really good punter. In 2022, he averaged 40 and a half yards per punt with a long of 54. And in 2021, he averaged 41.5 yards per punt with a whopping 67-yard long. He's got the leg. He can boom it down the field. If he can continue to be a guy who can do more coffin punts and or corner coffin, I don't know. pinning him inside the 10, basically, or at least the 20. If he's able to continue doing that, look, there was a lot of special teamers that got drafted this year, and that was a very, very crazy thing to see that I feel 100% will not happen again for a very, very long time. And Carlson, while very talented, is still going to have a lot to prove to show that he's worthy of being drafted, period, let alone just making it to the pros. But I do think that if he's able to continue putting stuff together, he feels like one of those guys that NFL teams just take a gamble on. And maybe he goes around the league a little bit and finds different homes in different places. But maybe he's also a guy that might be able to carve a little niche at the next level. Dario Longhetto is very interesting to me. So Longhetto in his entire career has missed just 2 extra points. This is in 3 seasons for him. And of that, he missed 1 last year, 31 of 32. And his first year starting, he had missed 1, going 9 for 10. 2021, he was a perfect 31 for 31. So he's great inside close. For his career, he is 9 for 9 inside of 29 yards, and he is 9 of 11 for inside 40 yards. Now, beyond that is where it starts to get iffy. He doesn't have the greatest accuracy in the world. A year ago, he was 2 of 6, kicking from 40 to 49, and he was 3 of 5 in 2021, making him only 5 of 11 on 40 to 49. 50-yard field goals, he's only attempted 5 in 3 years, but he's made 3 of them. So for what it's worth, I don't know just how much like a dynamic kicker he can be when you need a 50+ yard field goal. There's plenty of time to grow and all that stuff. And Arizona State will hopefully be a good opportunity for him to get more field goal chances to kind of show off his stuff and see what he can do. But yeah, this is a guy that definitely has some room to grow. I'll obviously be rooting for him, and I will certainly be hoping that at a minimum he can put together a really good season at Arizona State, just so we have some positive momentum to build off of moving forward. One more time, I want to shout out my everydayers who are obviously here every day. Make sure that you tune in for tomorrow's episode of the Locked On Sun Devils podcast as we take a look at the established Sun Devils that are already in the NFL, including Brandon Ayuk and Rachaad White, plus more. Make sure that you tune in to tomorrow's episode. 3 guys I want to mention on the defensive side of the ball. If you've listened to this podcast, you know who they're going to be. We'll go ahead and start with one of my favorite players on the entire roster, Ro Torrence. Torrence last year absolutely seized a starting position for the Sun Devils. And at 6'3", 210 pounds, he's got that combination of size and physicality that teams are going to fall in love with at the cornerback position. 36 tackles, 8 deflected passes, 1 interception last year, and true lockdown ability. He was one of the lone bright spots on an otherwise really underwhelming defense. And I truly believe that Torrence is going to ascend to star status on this defensive side of the ball. There's a lot of really good secondary players that should be able to help him get to that point. Some of those guys that we'll get into in just a moment. But looking at Ro Torrence, looking at the physical traits that you can't teach, and looking at the upside of him just continuing to get better and perfecting his craft, yeah, Ro Torrence looks like he's going to get Arizona State back on track in the secondary. But it's not just him we're going to be looking at. It's also some of his partners in crime. We're going to look at Jordan Clark now. And if there's one thing that NFL teams have really fallen in love with in the last 5 years alone, is legacy guys of players who were studs at the pros. You had Joey Porter Jr. this year. You have Marvin Harrison Jr. next year. You've had Asante Samuel Jr. You've had Jeremiah Trotter Jr. in next year's draft. Like, there feels like just a limitless amount of juniors that are going to the pros that have really built a reputation for themselves. And while Jordan Clark isn't a junior, he is still the son of Pro Bowl safety Ryan Clark. Played for both the then Washington Redskins and the Pittsburgh Steelers. He was a stud. He was a safety, Jordan Clark, definitely more of a nickel, but does have some free safety experience. Not quite the hitter his dad was, but he's still not afraid to put his pads down and make a good hit. He does have some decent ball skills, 3 interceptions in the last 2 years and 8 pass deflections in the last 3 years. But last year, he really kind of ascended and came into his own as a complete overall player when he recorded a career best 47 tackles and 36 solos. Jordan Clark is just a real classic nickelback that, some teams aren't going to value as much as others, and shame on them because I look at Jordan Clark and I see a dude who's got the potential to be a massive difference maker at the next level. He's got the versatility to play safety, to play nickel, to play boundary, to play near the line of scrimmage. I feel like he's a jack of all trades, and while some may say he's a master of none, I feel like there's just a lot of room for him to continue to grow and become a master of many of those skills. Jordan Clark, one of, if not arguably my favorite player on the defensive side of the football. He's entering his 5th year. This will be his last hurrah to really show off what he's got. And I think that we're going to be in for some fireworks in 2023 from Jordan Clark. The last guy I want to talk about was a guy who transferred to the program last year, really stood out, and is now going to be one of the leaders in the secondary. I, of course, am talking about Chris Edmonds. Edmonds at 6'2", 215 is a very rangy safety. I don't even want to call him like a free safety or a strong safety because I think that he can do a little bit of everything, but it's his coverage skills that just stand out so much to me. In his 4 years in college, he's recorded 11 interceptions, 3 in each of the last 2 years and 4 in 2020. 3 of those seasons, of course, being with is it Samson? It's literally right in front of me. Samford, excuse me. Samford, Bulldogs out in Alabama. He comes to ASU. He has 3 interceptions. He should have had a pick 6, but, Anthony Cooper was offsides. I'm sure he bought him a steak dinner to make up for it, but Chris Edmonds just has that range. The problem for him is this looks like a really stacked safety class. There's I'm not even going to remember names right now, even though I did a mock draft that you guys should check out for all Cardinals. But James Williams at Miami, there's a kid at Clemson, there's a kid, Javon Bullard is who I'm thinking of at Georgia. I can't remember his first name, but Makuba, I believe is how you pronounce his last name, is the Clemson safety. There's a lot of really talented safeties this year. So Chris Edmonds would have to do a lot to be able to stand out. But the good news is that ball production, just that really stands out. Ball don't lie. And 11 interceptions in 4 years is impressive, with a chance to continue to add to that total in 2023. There's a realistic chance that he could walk away from college football with 15 career interceptions. And that is something to note, especially in today's football, where you just don't see guys that generate a lot of interceptions anymore. It's not like the old days where people could get really physical with wide receivers and quarterbacks just, quite frankly, weren't as talented as they are now. It's a very different league. 15 interceptions in 5 years doesn't feel like a lot to some people, but I promise you that it is. And I'm so looking forward to Edmonds this year. Quite frankly, I named 3 guys in the secondary alone. I've been high on the secondary. I'm going to continue being high on the secondary. I like the upside that these guys have. I really am intrigued by their potential, but those are just a small handful of guys that will be eligible for the 2024 NFL draft. And there's plenty of time for these guys to improve their stock. And there's guys that I didn't talk about to also improve their stock. Who are the guys you're going to be looking forward to during the 2023 season to prepare for the 2024 season? There's a lot of time between now and then. So do your homework, find a guy that you like, and let me know in the comments on YouTube or on Twitter. You can find me at Richie Bradshaw 36 and the podcast as well at LO_Sun Devils. Thank you guys again for tuning in to Locked On Sun Devils. Wherever you're getting your podcast, make sure that you hit like and subscribe and turn on those notifications so that you get an update whenever we post new content. And stay in touch with that content by, again, following me on Twitter at Richie Bradshaw 36 and the podcast at LO_Sun Devils. I will talk to you guys tomorrow about established Sun Devils in the NFL and maybe some reasonable expectations. But until then, you keep it locked right here on Locked On Sun Devils.